So my heart is very heavy about the victims of the flood down in Texas. This is just heartbreaking for me. Most of you probably know this incredibly fast-moving flash flood that raised the level of the Guadalupe River. Oh, it raised by 26 feet in 45 minutes. That's crazy. It rose like a minute or a foot every 2 minutes. And it was before, it was at like 4 a.m. So everybody was sleeping, particularly in this camp. Miyoko and I discovered she has a connection to one of the victims. You might have heard the story of a young woman who, I don't think she was in the car with her family, and it went off a bridge that got wiped away, and she actually saved her family by opening the door, and everybody else in her family got out. She didn't. And Miyoko just found out today that she knows the family, and in fact, the girl who died used to play with my stepdaughters. So they're the same age, they're 17. So back about 12 or 13 years ago. Even before I knew that, I'm just overwhelmed with heartbreak that this many people just instantly passed. So, I want to hold those who are suffering, in our hearts and our practice. I was drawn to talk today about mortality and impermanence, how we practice with those things, how we work with those things, how we understand those things. In Buddhism, they're different. Impermanence and mortality, they're different. In some other spiritual traditions, I think, have very deep practices around mortality and understandings around mortality. And I think Buddhism has a very, very deep understanding of that. But my thoughts haven't matured on it, so I thought I was going to talk about that until about 2 hours ago, and then I realized that my thoughts weren't mature on it, so I'm going to give it a few more weeks. And I decided that I was so inspired by Sokyo's presentation last week, and there were so many things that she sparked in me that I wanted to share the things that she inspired in me. So I went back and I listened to a part of her presentation from last week in order to inspire me for my sharing. So that's what my talk today will be about. I'm not sure exactly where it'll go, but for those of you who haven't seen Sokyo's presentation, or as I call it, a transmission, the video is up, and I do encourage you to watch it. It's quite a powerful, transmission of her experience, which has a very deep teaching, very deep Dharma, to what she's brought forward from her journey over the last 3 years. She's been on a pilgrimage. For those of you who may not know, Sokyo's been on a 3-year pilgrimage where she's been practicing out of her hermitage on wheels. She's driving across the country. So please do go and watch that video, which is linked on our website and through our newsletter. And I know you'll enjoy it very much. But there are things to me that I just loved so much. I mean, I loved the whole thing. It was so artfully done, and so impactful. there's some things that really stood out for me that I wanted to share and reinforce. So Sokyo shared about pilgrimage being actually intrinsically a key part of the Zen tradition, both external pilgrimages as well as internal pilgrimages. And she talked about Hakuin going on a pilgrimage. I didn't realize that Hakuin's pilgrimage was 14 years. Yeah, Hakuin being a very famous Zen master from the early 18th century in Japan, who revitalized, Zen practice, and we still kind of study his life and his teachings. But I was interested in what brought him to the pilgrimage and what he got out of it. Sokyo went into a little bit of this. I'll go into a little bit more detail. He had been doing rigorous Zen training for a number of years, but he found himself in something of a spiritual crisis. And the crisis had a few elements to it. One was that he didn't feel that his depth of understanding was deep enough, and he wanted to deepen it. Another was, I think, he still felt a real suffering associated with his own attachment, to himself and perhaps to other things. We're not sure exactly what. But he definitely was suffering very much, and he was suffering also physiologically. He had what was termed a Zen sickness. That might have unfolded more after he was on pilgrimage for a period of time. But he hadn't, let's say he definitely hadn't harmonized, his understanding in his body. So things were out of whack. He was out of whack. So he did seek, I guess I would say, well, I'll elaborate. So he did go around to a series of masters, and then he did come upon one whose name was Eigoku Komyo. That resonated with me because we have a Komyo in our Sangha here. And Eigoku Komyo was 81 years old at the time, so quite an elderly Zen master who did advise that Hakuin go on a pilgrimage and basically withdraw from society and go into the mountains. Right? He felt that Hakuin's understanding was incomplete, and he advised him to do that, so to withdraw from society and live in the mountains. And Hakuin said, and Sokyo quoted this, that Hakuin should be prepared to remain there, withering away with the trees and the plants until you find your way through. Yeah. So withering away in the Zen context, it isn't exactly what it sounds like. What is to be withered away is our attachments. It isn't our vitality. Right? It's those things that detract from our vitality because we're holding them so tightly. And what we come to find is that life is a rich field for us to hold on and clutch onto things the way we want things to be, physical states, understandings, clarity. These are the things that detract from our vitality. So the withering away that he recommended we practice is to go and to let those attachments wither away. So we become more like an empty vessel, and we can let the breeze of life flow through us, the energy of life flow through us. Until you find your way through. Through what? Through the obscurations. Through the things that we're holding on to and the way that our own understanding is clouded. So one thing that comes to me from this advice is that there are no shortcuts. even someone who'd been meditating for many years, who had been practicing as a formal Zen monk for many years, was being advised to, go up into the mountains and practice diligently until you find your way through. Indefinitely. There's no time frame on it. It's not a 3-week retreat. It's not a 3-month retreat. It's not a 3-year retreat. And there are practices that, have that quality to them. And those are great. I'm not putting those down at all. In fact, one of our seniors here is Anna, just left for a 3-week solo retreat down in southern Colorado just yesterday, or today perhaps. And I'm, so strongly supportive and actually jealous of him that he gets to do that. I wish I could. Maybe some of you do too. But, that actually is an accelerant to our practice to be able to do intensive work like that. But ultimately, there are no shortcuts to practice. We do have to wither away. We do have to muddle our way through. We do have to meet the world with a full engagement and be present to whatever our reactivity is to those things. Whatever we resist persists. And shortcuts are usually a way to avoid or resist the unpleasant things. So pilgrimage at its best is an actual embrace of encounter. It's not an escape. And that came so much through with Sokyo's presentation. Meeting the unknown, meeting unknown people, meeting unknown situations, scary situations, certainly uncomfortable situations. It took Hakuin over a year to find a suitably remote spot. I like that. He built a tiny hut, completely isolated from the world, and he subsisted on minimal food. He was there for 14 years. And this is where his meditation sickness kind of hit. What's termed a severe physical and mental breakdown. And then he sought out a mysterious hermit named Hakuyu, who lived in a cave deep in the mountains near Kyoto. And Haku taught him special meditation and breathing techniques that helped him recover. This encounter not only restored Hakuin's health, but also deepened his spiritual understanding, leading him to integrate Buddhist and Confucian teachings into his practice. He talks about these breathing techniques that he learned from this monk, Hakuyu, in his spiritual autobiography, which is collected under the title Wild Ivies, and maybe you may have met it. And they're amazing, actually. I've practiced with them on occasion, and I teach them on occasion to others. They're quite powerful. These types of practices are not transmitted in most of the Zen lineages that have come to us, particularly in the American lineages. But they are available. I just love the, almost like the archetypal power of this. He goes off and he goes deep into his ordeal, this whole extended rite of passage that he's undergoing. And then in the depth of his sickness, right, at the darkest night of his soul, the darkest moment, he finds this mysterious hermit to offer him the gift of this practice. Have you found any? Maybe. Yeah, right? When we really do go deep like that, then our teachers and our guides and our allies do appear to help us. They do. So what was his intention? I wanted to look into that. So he did have a spiritual crisis that led him to talk to all of these teachers and ultimately impelled him into this 14-year hermitage, you could say. And, as I take it from his words and then from others who have commented on him, there's a number of aspects to it. He went to relieve his own suffering. Okay, I think he was just experiencing, the pain of some kind of attachment or fear that he felt, that he really wanted relief from. He wanted to resolve his doubts, and he wanted to deepen his understanding. So those are these two aspects of our practice that we call faith and wisdom. Okay, he wanted to resolve his doubts, which means he wanted to develop his own faith. And he wanted to do that by developing his insight and his understanding, which is wisdom. And then he also wanted to discover a path that could be reliably transmitted to others, helping future generations of people and Zen practitioners especially awaken to their true nature and relieve suffering for themselves and others. This is a really important, I think, aspect of the intention. This is his very much his bodhisattva spirit. And it's really important in Zen, especially when we talk about doing something like going off on pilgrimage and going off, by oneself. It isn't really by oneself. It certainly isn't exclusively for oneself. And you can tell from Sokyo's presentation that certainly wasn't the spirit in her pilgrimage. She was doing it for all those reasons. And that's compassion. So we've got the relieving one's own suffering, that's the stick. And we've got developing understanding, that's wisdom. We've got helping others, that's compassion. And it's a journey that takes a lot of faith and a lot of doubt, a lot of questioning. Faith, doubt, and determination, leading us to grow in wisdom and compassion. So I'm curious how these kind of intentions or motivations resonate for you. Like how much are you feeling a kind of a suffering within that at some level you recognize that you can relieve through yourself with a spiritual practice? When I started practice, that was 95% of it for me, relieving that. So how much of it is that for you now? It's a great motivation. Great motivation. And then how about resolving your doubts and deepening your understanding? I think that resolving my doubts was a big part of it. Deepening my understanding was a big part of it. I think when I started, that was the other 5%. It's 95% relieving my own suffering, 5% deepening my understanding. And then how much of it is about, cultivating something that you can actually transmit to others and future generations. So when I started, that was 0. Yeah, it was. I was very self-absorbed. That's okay. I'm not criticizing. That's how it had to be. That's how I was. But now, that's the majority of my motivation. That's part of it. Not that I don't have doubts and I can't deepen my understanding. I absolutely can. But I would say actually none of it's about relieving my suffering, because that just goes with the territory. So it's not an explicit motivation for me. In fact, I really embrace my suffering. So there's no avoidance of that. So that's to 0. Resolving doubts and deepening understanding is a good maybe 25 or 30%, and then 65 to 70% is about, just doing work that I feel help others. Is this helpful at all to give you percentages like this? Maybe I'm a little crazy, a little kooky. I know. And I don't know if you're doing it for yourself. You're like think I'm crazy, or like there's no right answers, and maybe it's just nonsense to even do it. But maybe for what it's worth. So these intentions are, I think they are all good. These are the aspects of bodhicitta, that way-seeking mind that brings us to practice. So kind of investigating that for yourself, and then it's nice. It's actually important to see this. What is motivating you. This creates an attitude in you. What I'm going to call a sacred intention. It's a sacred intention. It's an attitude. In my Dharma talk at last month's session, I talked about attitudes in practice. These mindsets, that we can bring to our zazen, to our meditation, to our lives. Non-judgmentalism, being non-judgmental, being non-reactive, being non-interfering. These types of attitudes. But this is the main attitude I think we can have, is to honor a motivation to develop in these ways. Right? If you orient yourself towards your own life with this spirit, with this sacred intention, it's the most important thing. Your practice will take care of you if you do that. So can you actually wake up every morning? And check in on those intentions, to deepen in wisdom, to see your true nature, to resolve your doubt, to finally trust that life will live you. Trust that life will live you, that you don't have to live your life in a certain way. And then to share your path with others in a way that helps them now and in the future, and really throughout space and time. So we don't have to do a 14-year pilgrimage to have this spirit of sacred intention. We can wake up every day with this. Dogen had some thoughts about pilgrimage as well, very similar. Sokyo mentioned a few things from him. I was inspired. He was very clear that it's not necessary to leave one's training place, because the true nature of pilgrimage is within ourselves, because the one we are seeking is our own true self. Now, many of you know that Dogen actually came to that after making a pilgrimage, a very dangerous pilgrimage, and a very lengthy pilgrimage. I think it was 5 years was his. Across the sea from Japan to China, and then around China before he found a teacher that he knew could help him, Tendo Nyojo. And then he stayed with him for, I believe it was 5 years. And then came back to Japan to share his understanding. So Dogen said, and Sokyo said this last week, to enter into any form of spiritual practice is to enter into pilgrimage. Yeah, Dogen actually, in the context of this, he recounted the story of a monk, a teacher named Nangaku, who actually stayed with his teacher for Daikon, for 15 years. to thoroughly explore the great matter of life. So, Daikon Eijo, Nangaku Eijo, entered the temple gate completely. One by one, person by person, episode by episode, he encountered the myriad delusions and saw through and beyond the flesh of the master's face. This greater exploration, Dogen says, is greater than the casual moving from one temple to another. So, can you meet each situation, each person, each myriad delusion as if you're entering a temple? Can every incident, every episode, every encounter be a sacred encounter? You can be. You can be. I really liked this expression from Francis Edo Carney, which Sokyo mentioned. And we kind of came upon this essay that she put up on the web many years ago, but we came upon it, I think, together as Sokyo was departing for her pilgrimage 3 years ago, and we were looking for kind of a framework to understand, her practice during this time, kind of just a way to set an intention for her path in this way. And I think it has really retained quite an inspirational power. They actually chant as part of their echo. We did our service today, and they chant as part of their chant, echo, dedication, if you will. May each person's powerful presence, dignified, profoundly introspective, and deep, have peaceful consequences that cannot be fully foreseen, affecting visible and invisible worlds throughout time and space. That's the sacred intention of the pilgrim. That's the sacred intention that we can hold in our pilgrim hearts, in our practice. May each person's powerful presence, dignified, profoundly introspective, and deep, have peaceful consequences that cannot be fully foreseen, affecting visible and invisible worlds throughout time and space. We do affect people, don't we, invisibly and invisibly throughout time and space with our quality of being, the quality of our heart resonance. We do. Do you notice that when you enter into a kind of a heart space or a heart resonance, and I don't mean just like a superficial mood, I mean you really engage with yourself, your practice, maybe you're doing some really good deep meditation practice, you're connecting with people, and that resonance, people respond to it. Yeah, and it's more than just eliciting a smile from the barista, although that's super important too, or the response to the person on the street who you offer some support to. I mean, actually, others who are resonating with that frequency, find you. Eckhart Tolle talks about our fear body, the fear body that many of us possess. We all possess, probably to a certain extent, and there's a vibration that fear body puts out, and then that others resonate with that fear body, and those who are resonating at the same fear frequency, they resonate with each other. They magnetize to each other, and then they amplify that fear resonance. Do you think that's happening these days? Sound familiar? Yeah. Watch any news show, any social media. I mean, it's just amplifying a fear body resonance across our collective body, right? But the good stuff works that way too. The heart resonance works that way too. Yeah. And it happens invisibly. It does. It happens through space and time, and it's not like, you can measure it with a Geiger counter, and it's not like it's always clear exactly who's feeling it or how they're feeling it. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that you're intersecting with another field of benevolence and positivity, and others who are resonating in that frequency will recognize you and enter into your field of aliveness as you would enter into their field of aliveness. Like we're doing right now, right? Yeah. This inner expedition that we're all on. It's an inner expedition that we're all on. So the very act of walking, whether it's in nature or daily life, becomes a rite of passage and a practice of awakening when it's done with this intent. So I want to conclude with this, observation that I drew from a Zen teacher, Dharma cousin, a few years ago, and I went, oh yeah, we're all converts to Buddhism, aren't we? We're all converts. I mean, some of you don't identify as Buddhists, so to the extent that you do, identify as Buddhist practitioners, converts, right? None of us grew up as Buddhists. Right? It wasn't the religion of our family of origin. There's a few people I don't know here, so that might not be true of everybody. But those of you who I know, you grew up in another religion or another spiritual context. So I grew up in a Catholic family. Some people grew up in Jewish families, or spiritual but not religious, or something else. But I don't think anybody grew up Buddhism. So all of us who are converts to this path, we entered into a pilgrimage at some point that brought us here, right? We're already deeply into a pilgrimage. Right? We departed the spiritual culture that we found ourselves in. We left it, and I'm going to go search through the brush, through the wilderness, through the lands, for something that's more nourishing, that makes more sense to me, that's more experientially alive for me. That's what drew me, with the mixture of those intentions that I talked about earlier. We set out on a search for that, to ease our suffering, to resolve our doubts, to see into our true nature, to help others. Now we found a certain place to practice, a home of practice in this practice for a period of time. Practice in certain forms for a period of time. But the pilgrimage is never ending. This question of what I'm seeking is actually an interesting one. I couldn't tell you at the beginning of my practice what I actually was seeking. So it's always a good question. What am I seeking? And then as we progress in our practice, our form of seeking changes. We come to see that it's not so much about getting something as it is the actual spirit of seeking itself, which tends to have these four qualities to it: developing wisdom, compassion, helping ourselves, and helping others. The ox herding pictures, they start with thrashing through the brush, looking for the ox. Those of you who know the ox herding pictures, which are a series of 10 pictures that kind of outline the spiritual path. And they start with looking through the brush for the ox. Where confusion, lostness, where is it? Where's my true nature? Who am I? And it ends with entering the marketplace. So I like to say it ends with a dance. It starts with thrashing and seeking, and it ends with a dance. So may all of your pilgrimages move towards the dance. Okay, thank you for your time.